Hi, welcome to HowtoDandD. My name is Fred Weller, and today I want to talk about Dungeons & Dragons 5e. And the topic for today is where to shove that piton. Where to hammer that piton in Dungeons & Dragons 5e. That's what I should be saying, right? Not the other thing that I just said. Sorry about that. Okay, so what can you use the piton for in Dungeons & Dragons? This is basically like a spike with a loop through it or a hook through it, and you feed rope through it, and it's usually used for... What is it used for? It's used for securing things. Oh, that's right. We've been here before. You can use it to create an anchor in rock or stone when you're climbing whatever it is. And then, of course, you use some ropes and a harness. We've been through that before. Of course, it's part of the climber's kit in Dungeons & Dragons 5e. It's part of any climber's kit, I would imagine. It would be ridiculous not to have some sort of anchoring point. What else can we actually use it for? Because that's really obvious, right? Well, you can take that piton and you can shove it into a lock and then cast enlarge on it to break it open. Hang on. Does that even work? Can you cast enlarge on a stationary object? You might need to negotiate with somebody on that one. It sounds like a cool idea, but in any case, if you shove the piton into the lock and it does fit, there's a good chance you might be able to break the lock, got a hammer and a piton, break the lock, jam the lock up, or just generally just create a big whole bunch of problems for whatever. So jamming a lock means that you should be able to make sure it stays closed so that while the enemy is trying to chase you down and butcher you, you can escape. So, very sensible. Let's jam the lock. What about those doors? This came up quite a lot. When I was asking the Dungeons & Dragons community on Facebook, this was one that used to come up constantly. And the idea was that you would pin the door with the piton to either keep it closed while you were having a long rest or a short rest or some sort of rest so that things could not get into the room, and you would spike them into the floor, or depending on the way the door will open, and hopefully your dungeon master is not that pedantic. But if it's opening into the room, easy to pin the door. If it opens out, very difficult because you've got to pin the door from the outside. You're going to be on the inside. So that's really not going to work. But you can also pin the door open so the door can't close, because apparently some doors in Dungeons & Dragons want to just close on you for some strange reason. I don't know why. Seems to happen a lot though. Okay, let's get on to traps. Let's think about what can we do with a piton with regard to a trap. Indiana Jones deals with a lot of pressure plates. And of course you can get the bag of sand and try to estimate the exact weight and so forth when you're trying to get your statue and so. But would it not have just been easier to get a piton and wedge that piton between the pressure plate and the rest of the structure to disable it, so that now the floor or trigger or pressure plate no longer can move? So there's another reason to have your piton, another way you can use it in your game. You can also use the sharp end of the piton to loosen a knot in a rope. So you tie a knot too tight, and maybe you've knotted your entire rope so it's easier to climb, and then the dungeon master says, oh, now how are you going to get the knots undone? And you say, well, I'm just going to undo them. And they say, no, they're too tight, you can't get them undone. And so I have a piton, I'll use that and stick that between the rope to loosen it up. And they're like, oh, okay, that kind of makes sense. Maybe you can get that one to swing by. There's always a chance, right? What about using your piton as an improvised dagger or a weapon? Why not? There's lots of possibilities here. Honestly, there's plenty of possibilities here. You can use your piton to secure a rope zip line to cross a wide gap or chasm. So piton each end, particularly if you don't have a mounting point, something you can tie the rope around, and you actually have to secure it into some rock or some stone or something like that. Just remember, at each end, it is always best to use at least 3 pitons, not just 1 piton, 3 at each end as a backup, just in case the fact that you are heavily laden and wearing armour, and make sure only one person crosses at a time, otherwise it's going to be a bit problematic. If you have a big chunk of ice that you need to chip off bits and pieces from it, or you want to chip off ice to get through a frozen door, well, there you go, a hammer and a piton, and you're away. And the great thing is that once you've finished doing that, you have a whole lot of ice for a nice cool drink later on. You can use your piton to create a center point in a piece of metal so that you can punch a hole through it. Okay, or what's even better, let's use the piton to actually punch a hole in a wall in a room if it's filling with water. You know the water trap room. It's a pretty obvious one. Get the piton, get the hammer, and you bash a hole in the wall, creating a location for the water to drain out. Make sure you put the hole at the bottom of the wall, not up the top. Down the bottom, not up the top. You can use your piton for hanging pictures on the walls. You can use it for securing your tent lines in a storm so it doesn't blow away. There's lots of things that can be blown away in a storm, and certainly I'd go with something like that. Piton, secure it down, bedding, secure it down, can't blow away in the wind, things like that. You can use 2 pitons and a rope to make a trip line. So secure it, both ends, somebody walks along, not paying attention, trips over the rope, fall on their stomach or their face, and now they're prone, and then go up to them and smack them on the back of the head and knock them out. Or other things if you like. There are plenty of possibilities there. You can use it for hanging up a hammock between 2 trees. Of course, don't leave the hammock there for too long, otherwise it's probably going to rot and be absolutely useless to you in the future, and therefore when you do go to actually use it, it will fall apart. You can use a piton to chip or carve inscriptions or instructions or writing into stone. So you could type in here, Bob the Destroyer was here, or Bob the Destroyer was not here, something like that. Instructions on stone, piton and a hammer, and you're away. That pesky vampire, and you found the coffin, you found the vampire, he's having a sleep, and it's time to deal with him, and suddenly you realise you do not have a wooden stake. And you don't want to go and look for a wooden stake later on, so you get out your piton. You know the piton going through the heart, it's not going to kill it, it's not made out of wood, you don't want to wake him up. So you just close the lid, you get out your hammer and your pitons, and you nail the vampire's coffin shut while you go and find a chair leg or something like that and come back, sharpen it up with your sword or a dagger, and then make yourself a stake and then stake that sucker. So another really useful way of dealing with the vampire with your pitons. Just hold them in place for a little while until you get back. You can use it to increase leverage with a crowbar. So you put it between whatever you're trying to crowbar up or out or whatever, and it isn't going to wear away the stone or rock there because it's made out of metal. The only thing it's likely to do is bend, but it will certainly help you increase leverage. Pretty obvious, we've done this sort of thing before. You can tie them together to make a wind chime. Now, why would we want that? Well, if there's a wind, then it makes a noise, and it might scare people away, and they sound kind of cool. A wind chime could also be put up, and then you use a string line and use it as part of an alarm system, so that if somebody tries to creep up on you while you're sleeping or in a campsite, there's a chime used and created. I mean, you could use a bell, but you can use your pitons. Just tie a few of them together and then just hang them. Okay, you can tie the piton to a rope. Well, hang on. So tie it to a rope, then throw it down the passageway, and then once you've thrown it down the passageway, drag it along the ground so that it will trip all of the traps that are sitting along that passageway without having to go down there. And it gives you a lot longer length, more than 10 foot. You don't have to worry about using the 10-foot pole now because, guess what? You've increased your range by using a different tool. You can use it to open up a crack or something in rock, brick, stone walls. You need to get a bit of a hole in there, so you put your piton in there, whack it with a hammer, and then break off some of the rock, brick, stone, and make a bigger hole. And that's just to open up that crack. For who knows? Coins might have fallen down that crack for all you know. Just if you need to get into a crack. So it can open up a crack. And make it easier for you to find or create handholds or footholds if you need to climb up a surface, and it's not going to be possible to actually just pound the piton straight into a solid piece of rock, and so you have to rely on just using the cracks that are available in the natural formation, something like that. Yeah. Okay. What about using it to anchor a pulley for lifting heavy objects? Yes, absolutely. If there's nothing you can hang your pulley system over, then so be it. You're going to anchor it with your pitons. Remember, you need to use quite a few pitons, otherwise it will fall and come crashing down and things will not go well. Or you can, we've talked kind of about turning your piton into a weapon with a rope, but why not tie your piton to a rope and make yourself a rope dart and go scorpion on your enemies. Come over here. And you can hook them, pull them in, tie them up, shave them if you need to, kill them, knock them out, those sorts of things. So there are quite a few different ways you can use your piton in the game of Dungeons and Dragons, or even Dungeons and Dragons 5e. And I'm hoping that you found this video helpful, and if you did, fantastic. I have hundreds of videos for players and dungeon masters with lots of different advice, and I recommend going and checking out one of those at some point. If you want to support the channel, so I keep doing videos like this, then make sure to check out my Patreon, where you get access to the live streams that go unlisted, additional content, and priority on the topics that I make. I also have affiliate links to the book depository and Amazon down in the description. That all supports the channel, so I keep doing this. I also have a merchandise shelf underneath the video if you want to check out some of that stuff. And hey, make sure to like, share, subscribe, hit the bell button to be notified when I go live and when I publish new videos, and that happens quite a bit as it happens. Until next time, keep rolling those 20s.